Good morning, everybody. To get us started today, I wanted to just take a look at yesterday's satellite data. I wish I had a lot of time to kind of cover that 8-day blizzard we endured last week that stretched, remember, began in California, hit the northern plains incredibly hard, some places well over 2 feet of snow, then moved over the Great Lakes where we end up seeing some lake effect snow over the weekend, plus all the heavy snow in the interior parts of New England. But just kind of neat to see today, we just kind of moved the cloud field over the top of the snow. A couple of neat things to see, from yesterday, where you can see that snowpack, plus the incredibly dense fog that was in parts of the Central Valley of California. Well, in the overnight last night, the next system we're going to be keeping an eye on here is still not yet kind of on the page. It is born in the Arctic. It is moving its way toward the Canadian prairie. It's about to slide through the midsection of the country here and be a very high impact system. So we're going to see lots of map colors like this week. And what I'm showing you here are wind chill warnings, wind chill watches, wind chill advisories. As we talked about last week, this is going to have a very shallow but very cold air mass that's going to be kind of born in the Arctic and race all the way down to the south and southeast over this week leading up to Christmas. In addition to that, there's going to be a very large low-pressure system that's going to emerge in the middle part of the country. We've already seen winter storm watches being posted for parts of Nebraska and Iowa, but we're going to have to watch the entirety of the Midwest and parts of the East for this as well. Now, there were a lot of shifts in the over the weekend in terms of model position of this low, and I'd like to take a moment to kind of explain why those shifts were there. But just remember, before we even get there, we still have another system to be dealing with here. So this is early this morning, about 10 o'clock is where I'm going to get this started. And we're going to be watching two things going on. To the south, coming out of Texas and Louisiana, Arkansas, Mississippi, there's scattered rain showers with possibly some embedded storms. There's also a low, a weak, that's not really called a low. There's an upper level trough that's trying to move through this area. It's going to be spreading some snow into parts of eastern Nebraska, but into Iowa and then into Minnesota. And this is going to press toward the Great Lakes as we get into overnight hours tonight and tomorrow. So that low curls up here over Lake Superior, but again, a lot of scattered showers in this area down here across the south into the southeast. Now, the system we're watching very carefully then enters the Pacific Northwest. I got some very important changes in the forecast for the West and Northwest into week 2, so hang on for that. But by Tuesday evening, we now start to see what we're expecting to be a pretty sizable winter storm in the midsection of the country in the days leading up to Christmas. So this would be through Tuesday night and getting our way out there toward Wednesday morning. So let's kind of step back and see what to expect out of this system. The first thing that changed is the trajectory of this trough. So I was kind of looking at it before we started here. But the colder air, very shallow air mass of cold air, again, began in the Arctic, is now sitting in this area. And the map I'm animating for you is a map of vorticity. This is cyclonic spin. That's counterclockwise spin in the atmosphere. What we look for in this map is two primary things. One, wherever you take an area of high vorticity and move it to an area of lower or even negative vorticity, which would be anticyclonic spin, you get rising motion in the atmosphere. We call this in atmospheric science as differential vorticity advection, and the differential part of that is going up in the atmosphere. What it does is it actually lowers the heights, and by lowering the heights you get cooling, and this all relates to rising motion in the atmosphere. Now, the second thing we watch for is the tilt. Okay, so I often talk about the tilt of troughs. So if we just kind of follow the contour lines, find the center of the trough, and just kind of bisect it. As we go in, the tilt of this trough through the beginning of this week is forward. It's got a positive tilt, looks like a forward slash. See this? It's forward tilting troughs or positively tilted troughs dig. So they send their energy south, southeast, and they advance quickly. What we watch for is that tilt to change. So this will be the nose of the really, really cold air, and this spin on it is going to tell us where the low is going to be. Now, as we go through Thursday, by the time we get into Thursday night, do you now see that the center of the trough is here? Let's draw an arrow just to kind of show you where the whole trough is. And instead of leaning forward, it now leans backward. That was not well forecast last week. In fact, we considered this trough to dig deep into the parts of for example, the Carolinas, the Mid-Atlantic, or into New England, which was going to produce a sizable storm system over New England. But if you saw the forecast evolve this weekend, this is the reason why. Now, there are several reasons that drove this. It really has a lot to do with the upwind and downwind jet stream pattern. But the reality of it is that the tilt is everything. So what we see here now is instead the best rising motion right in through here. And you say, why right in there? That's where this ribbon of vorticity is being advected or moved into that area. So that's where we're moving high vorticity into a region that has lower vorticity. So the net effect is that getting from Thursday into Friday, we're going to watch for possibly a large storm system somewhere over Indiana. Now, I'll show you how big the spread is in a few moments, but this is considerably different from last week where we thought this would be farther to the east, which means we watched a westward progression of this trough over the weekend. I mean, probably 500 to 700 miles back to the west. And that, unfortunately, is a common trait with these winter storms, and I should have mentioned that last week. I think I was just too much caught up in the potential of it to kind of remember the meteorology that a lot of times the models over-predict how far these dig. Okay, so what does all that mean? Let's now just go look at it in the combination of the GFS 0Z run versus the European. So as we play this forward, we've already watched the first system. So there it is in the GFS. Here it is in the European. That's the light snow coming through parts of the upper Midwest. There's the rain we talked about with possibly some embedded thunderstorms down south. So that system goes through, and here is the cold air on high pressure coming out of the Arctic that's going to be into the Canadian Prairie and northern plains. And then here's the system to the south of it, the shortwave that's digging in here. So what we now notice is that this is by Wednesday evening, getting into Thursday morning, 6 a.m. Central Time. There's Thursday midday. There's Thursday evening. Both models are predicting a sizable storm, but they are not in the same position, just as we talked about last week, which again just adds to the uncertainty where this is going to be. There's still a lead wave here and here, bringing rain to the East Coast. But how quickly on Thursday night into Friday morning, that's midnight Friday morning, getting into Friday 6 a.m., and after. Do you see how this system, because of the change in the tilt, now curls up into the Great Lakes in both models? So it's here instead of here. That was the weekend transition we saw. And unfortunately, that does happen with winter storms. But this is going to be a high-impact system from Wednesday all the way through Saturday and Sunday. And this is what things look like by Sunday as it exits. Now, if we kind of put all this together, now seeing these two models, I want to show you the spread. So this is the European ensemble. And remember, there's 51 different simulations in this. Each one has a slight perturbation or a change in the initial conditions to give you a different outcome. It represents the uncertainty in the forecast. So each one of these L's is where one of the 51 members of the European ensemble placed the center of the low on Thursday evening at 6 p.m. So apparently it's somewhere between the border of Illinois and Indiana, but the spread is actually over several Midwestern states. So you say, well, why do I see the models flip-flopping on my snowfall forecast? The reason is because normally wherever the low is, you go about 100 to 200 miles to the north and west of it, you're going to find your heaviest snow band. So if the low is over Kentucky, then that's in central Indiana. If the low is over, where I live here in Champaign, then the heavy snow is over western Illinois or Iowa, getting into Wisconsin, or even Minnesota, depending on where it's going to be. So we see a tremendous amount of uncertainty because of that. Now, I can show you snow maps until I'm blue in the face. This is this morning's GFS run. My grandmother's very unhappy about this because she lives right here, and she wants us all to come over for Christmas. And I had to message her and say, Grandma, one of the models put 20 inches of snow down over your house. I said, I'm bringing the sleds. The European model doesn't have it. It's got this whole system bringing more snow into parts of the Great Lakes states. And we've seen actually the European model and the GFS bounce all over the place with this. I'm just rocking back and forth. The ensembles even show a difference. I have the European ensemble, snowfall through Christmas morning, on the left, and the GFS on the right. And you can see the differences in the models, all due to the placement of that trough. So there's uncertainty. We're going to have to wait until we fully see this system get into Idaho before I can even make a better assessment about where it's going to be. And this is all, by the way, just 4 days out. So this just is an illustration of the difficulties in predicting this. Now, I do want to bring up an important point. I put this in the report, and you can pull these up from my maps at any time on the website that I linked for you in the report. But what you've got here is for Des Moines, Iowa. And when this system comes through, the origin of this very cold air, which will have winds that could be gusting up to 50 miles an hour, was, remember, over the Chukchi Sea 2 days ago. So when those temperatures get down there, 10 degrees Fahrenheit to maybe as cold as minus 15. With 40 mile an hour winds, we'll see wind chills that'll be in that minus 30 to minus 50 to minus 60 range. And that gets worse the farther north and west you go. Just to show you what the low temperatures are going to look like. So this is low temperatures in the numbers. The color shading tells you the anomaly. So already today, we're in like the minus 13 range, minus 19 in this part of North Dakota. But as we go forward, this is now Tuesday morning's lows into Wednesday morning, minus 30. Okay, as we go from there into Thursday morning's lows and Friday, this is when the cold air gets let out, where it's trapped at the beginning of the week here, it gets let out across the rest of the country. And so this is Friday going into Saturday and Sunday. Now, the winds on this are going to be critical to watch. So take a look. Let's just play out to when that nose of that high pressure system comes out right here. So this is Wednesday night. You're already starting to see the strong winds. Remember, temperatures are already going to be well below zero. And this very, very high contrast between the high pressure here and the low pressure out ahead of it is going to drive just a fierce wind in the midsection of the country. Again, we'll see sustained winds of 30, gusts up to 50. And that's when the temperatures are already down there at 0 or below. So then the winds wrap around this deep low that goes over, in the European model's case, right over lower Michigan after going through Indiana, and then wrap up into the Great Lakes and eventually to eastern Canada. So that's the outlook for this pattern. But it's going to adjust. And I provided several reasons in the report, but let's get to the big one. The Pacific Jet by about December 28, 29 will finally extend. It's breaking through what has been just a really mess of a flow over parts of the Gulf of Alaska, including at times big blocking ridges that have gone through Alaska into the Arctic. Well, we now see, and this was in the weekend model trends, that this strong Pacific Jet will extend and target the West Coast. And the important part about that is this will give us a more mild pattern as we finish this year, the very end of this year, and kind of cut off the duration of this really Arctic outbreak. But it's also going to increase our chances for precipitation. I actually think that the GFS has probably got it right, whereas the European I still think is too dry in this area. It's kind of a complaint I've had as of late. So what you're looking at here is the week 2 precipitation anomalies, which get you all the way out there to January 2nd. So again, better flow. And this is such a difference from last year. Do you remember last year? We'd already shut off the flow in the west, and it was shut off for January, February, March. Not the case, at least at this point in January, which is very good news. And in tonight's in-depth report, we're going to talk about what we might think in terms of the sustainability of that going forward, especially with La Nina. Okay, to get to the end of this, though, I want to show you that your forecast for the next 5 days, that's the brutally cold Arctic outbreak. And then we're going to watch, after that, here we go. This would be day 5 through 10. It's still going to stay cold across the east. But there's that mild air coming in. And both the European and the GFS have this. They got more mild air showing up as we finish 2022, the very, very last couple days of it going into 2023. And the last thing I kind of skipped over there just for a moment was what was going on in South America. We are watching for the potential of a front to slide through Argentina, Paraguay, and Uruguay at the end of this week, really into the weekend, delivering much needed rainfall. So the models trended less dry in this area, but still very wet across the northern areas. And honestly, even though it looks dry, and from Mato Grosso do Sul to Rio Grande do Sul, the newest runs brought moisture back up in this area. One thing that's important is if that front does come through, the day 5 through 15 temperature outlook is cooler for much of South America, which is important given that this will be the start of winter. Okay, that's what I wanted to share with you this morning. I look forward to talking again tonight. Have a good start to your week, and we'll keep a very close eye on this high-impact system coming across the mid part of the country. Thanks.